Can you read?
Awesome. And we're live. So, welcome back, guys, to yet another edition of Product Saturdays with the Product Folks. And thank you so much for joining us. Today, we have with us Rishi, who's currently a PM lead with Google. So, for folks who've joined us for the first time, a very quick intro into the community. The Product Folks is a volunteer driven community of product managers and enthusiasts. We started about a year and a half ago. We've done about 130 plus events. Apart from that, we have Learn PM with Me, which is a free curated set of resources to help people break into product management. We have Insurjo.club, which is an early stage APM program, very similar to a lot of the APM programs. This is one cohort a year, so do definitely check it out. Again, to iterate, all these resources are free, all these are volunteer driven. So in case you want to join the team, feel free to drop us a DM on Twitter. We have a bunch of other masterclasses. The recordings are on YouTube, so feel free to check that out as well. And without further ado, starting off our session for today. Today, we'll be discussing the role of user empathy in product management. I think a lot has been spoken about this, but for many product managers trying to practice this in daily life, I think it'll be very interesting to hear real life examples as well as the how to do this. So today we have Rishi joining us. Rishi has been with Google for over 12 years, so it's a long journey. With one company in today's time, but that gives us an opportunity to hear these experience from varied, like the entire suite of Google products that he's worked with. He's transitioned into Google right after his MBA, which he did at ISV, and before that he worked with a bunch of other companies. So Rishi, over to you. Would love to hear this. And guys, we'll join you back after the first 30-40 minutes for a quick fireside with Rishi. So in case you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the questions tab and we'll pick that up. Over to you, Rishi.
Great. Thanks a lot, Suhas. Firstly, I want to congratulate the Product Folks community. I think you guys are doing such a fantastic job in terms of just getting all the product management folks and people who are interested in product management in a community-centric approach. And the best part is you've kept it free so that it's open and people can come in. So I think I'm super impressed, and I think great job there. And thanks for the opportunity to come and interact with the community today. Hi folks, I'll be talking about user empathy in product management. This is going to be more of an interactive session. I want to keep it slightly informal. So feel free to ask me questions and so on. I have a bunch of slides that I will be presenting, and post that. Let's keep it informal. Ask me whatever comes to mind. So with that, I'm going to just present my deck. All right. A quick intro about myself. So I've been in Google for 11 and a half years, a little over 11 and a half years, I would say. And before that, I was working with Fidelity Investments, and prior to that, I was with Oracle. So that's been my journey. And within Google, I've had an opportunity to work on a bunch of products, either directly or indirectly. The longest stint I had was in the G Suite team, which was originally called Google Apps for Work, and now it's called Google Workspace. So it kept getting new names. But when I joined that team, it was only serving to SMB and smaller organizations, and had a good fortune of just looking at of that product and build some foundational features there, where now it is used in a large number of companies. Including mid-sized and large organizations, and it's become one of the very popular productivity suites across B2B. In the last 2 years plus, I've been with GPay, focused on the GPay payments platform, which is the platform side of Google Pay, working very closely with the consumer and the merchant teams on Google Pay. And so I lead this function, and I've seen the growth of GPay, the crazy growth that we have seen, and been very lucky to actually experience that kind of love from users, and so got that opportunity to just watch that space very closely. Objective for today's session is I just want to share my thoughts and experiences around what makes a product successful, and introduce some frameworks that can be useful to test some of your product ideas. And secondly, really go deep into the empathy side of product management, and see how empathy can be used and harnessed as part of product development. One disclaimer is all these views that I'm going to be sharing is in personal capacity and does not represent any of the companies that I work in. Okay, let's start. So, as most of you might know, product management is in the center of these three key pillars, which is the customer, technology, and business. And product management is really the art of balancing these three key pillars. And we'll be looking into how product managers can use certain frameworks to balance these three things in building successful products. I want to start off with doing a short exercise. I'd like you to think of a product that you don't like, that you might have used and you don't like, and on the same lines, I want you to think of a product that you love, and tell me one or two reasons. And you can type it in the AirMeet chat, and I will be reviewing it. So let's take maybe 30 seconds, 30, 40 seconds to just type in what comes to mind. You don't have to think too deeply, but whatever comes to mind. I'm just curious about that. So let's just do that short exercise. Okay, Akanksha says, do not like Sony Live, frictional UX, can't navigate, bumpy journey. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. What about others? Please feel free to type in there. Okay, Abhinandan says does not like Amazon. Please also mention the reasons. Okay, Siddharth says does not like MS365, clunky, slow response. Okay. Okay, Utsav says, Craig, love the interface design. Great. Okay. Okay, Flipkart, poor recommendation engine. LinkedIn do not like, lots of potential spammy feed, WhatsApp, Zoom. Slack got the product due to its. So Akhil says he loves Slack because he loves the product due to its vast amount of easy app integrations. Great. Okay. Fantastic. I mean, fantastic answers. I think really insightful answers here. Aditya says like WhatsApp. Yeah, everyone loves WhatsApp. Okay. Siddharth says admin of G Suite. Yes, we'll share the feedback. Siddharth. Great. This is great. So this is really good. Thanks for sharing. And there's one more from Utsav. Craig. Very difficult to understand what's there, what sort of discovery every time. All right. Great. Lot of great responses and a lot of deep thinking that's going on in terms of what you like in terms of the product. The reason I wanted to do this exercise is to really go deep into this fundamental question: why do products fail? And if you look at some of the answers that have come in the chat, a lot of it is because some set of user needs are not being met, right? And a lot of times products get built by product managers, but they meet needs at certain level, right? Like there are products that fail in a very epic way, and that happens because they're not able to build products to meet even the basic needs. But then there are products who do decently well, but then they can't go beyond that because there are other products who are able to go deeper into that. So the fundamental pattern that you would see in the responses is that somewhere we are not truly listening to user needs, right? So why does this happen? Complex question, and my interpretation and my this is that while we do tend to listen and do the user research initially, but we are not able to sometimes go deeper than what the feedback has been shared. And the deeper you go, the more informed will be the product strategy, the more informed will be the product design. And really is it's limitless, right? I mean, this process is limitless. You can keep going deeper and deeper. And organizations and product managers who are able to build the skill set are the ones who will be able to build a product which really scales and is loved by users. So that was the idea of this exercise. Let's look at a framework for how to look at how products can succeed and what cannot succeed. Again, this is my view, so feel free to disagree and feel free to put your own inputs and and modify this framework as you might feel fit based on your own product experience. So in my view, there are four key pillars for what makes a product successful. The first one is the product has to meet essential needs. It has to meet some essential need. It cannot be something that it is not addressing directly through the product experience and through the product feature set. The second is once a product is meeting essential need, it has to be well aligned to the market space. And what this means is it has to be economical to buy. It has to fit into the budget that a typical user pays for that kind of a product. The pricing has to be competitive and so on. The third is once the first two layers are built, the third is it has to do better than what the competitors are offering, right? So it has to be elegant. And elegance is not just about look and feel. It's also about what kind of technology that the product is using, right? So one of the participants had shared that one of the e-commerce products is not great because the recommendation engine is not great, right? So that also comes under the elegant category, that while it is providing some recommendations, but it's not doing justice to those recommendations to the level at which the user is expecting, right? So it loses out there. And if you look at the first three pillars, I think those are good enough to build a good product. But there is a difference between good products and great products. And that differences comes from the fourth pillar, which is purpose. So if the product is going and serving a certain deeper purpose, almost in a missionary zeal, and is bringing some sort of transformation in the marketplace, then I would say those products enter the great products kind of a category. And it's also a function of the opportunity, right? So when I think about payment products in particular, an opportunity got created post demonetization in India, and a lot of these apps came in around that time and were able to capitalize that and achieve and address a deep-rooted need that was there in the marketplace. I want to give an example of a very famous example. I think a lot of you might be aware of this, but I wanted to use this because this is a very well-known example, but also very relevant example. So BlackBerry used to rule the Indian mobile enterprise mobile industry for a very long time, and it was seen as this pioneer in many ways. But something changed in 2007 when this whole leadership position that BlackBerry had changed. And what was that? It was basically the advent of iPhone, which came in 2007, and this completely disrupted the smartphone market and industry, and that completely changed the trajectory for BlackBerry. The interesting question is, why did that happen? So if we apply this framework for two phones, you can see, you can get some hint of why that happened. Um, if let's look at the essential needs category first. So the iPhone started satisfying one very critical need that was just emerging at that point, which is that more and more users were using applications, and each app was like, it could be a gaming app, it could be any other app. Each app required a different keyboard, which BlackBerry could not achieve, right? Because BlackBerry was a fixed hardware, it was a QWERTY keyboard, and so on. So at the essential needs level itself, the iPhone took lead. In terms of market alignment, I would say that wasn't that big a factor. The third big factor was elegance. So Apple was solving the problem of mobile communication in a very, very elegant way. The technology that was being used, the look and feel, the aspirational look of it. And finally, in terms of purpose, Apple realized that use of mobile phone is going to send just the business kind of, which is email and so on, to more holistic life engagement kind of use cases, which is gaming, entertainment videos, and so on. So if you look at this framework, it gives you a hint of how that really helped Apple move ahead in this race. And then since then, there's been no looking back. One quick quiz that I wanted to run. Now that we know Apple has been so successful in the smartphone industry, how many phones has iPhone sold across all its models? So any guesses? Okay, Balaji says 800 million. Okay, Akanksha 2 billion. Alan says 1 billion. Anirudh 1 billion. 5 billion. Okay. 400 million. Sabarish, no, that's too low. Okay, Ayush. Great. So a lot of good inputs. The right answer is 2 billion plus. And the reason I brought this question is I wanted to share, what does success really look like? This is what it looks like, right? 2 billion phones being sold. And one of the colleagues I had at Google told me, who he was based in Bay Area, he told me that he used to, religiously take a tent and, sleep where they would launch a new version, like the Apple store in San Francisco, where they would release the new version, and like sleep there for 2 days before that, right? So that's the kind of mass fan following that this product was able to create, which is very impressive, right? I mean, this is what success looks like, and there are a lot of such examples in history of products. For example, PlayStation is a very famous example. Even Rubik's Cube is another example which has become legendary. Harry Potter, and so there are so many of these products that have become so successful. So one of the areas that I wanted to focus in today's session in this framework is on the bottommost pillar, which is essential need. And the key thing there is, it's important for product managers not just to meet the express needs of the users. So you do user research, users will tell you, I want X, Y, Z. But it is far more critical for product managers to sense the unexpressed need that the user is trying to say. And how does a product manager do that? So this is where empathy comes into picture. And if you're able to connect with the user at a deeper level, you will be able to sense that, okay, this person is saying X, but let's go take a step back and let's go deeper and deeper. What exactly are they trying to solve, right? And taking that approach is very critical, because otherwise we run into the faster horses problem, right? So faster horses problem is the one which I believe Henry Ford had shared, that if you go and ask users what do they want, they would say, I want faster horses. This is when there were no cars. So I think it's a balance that we have to strike. While we have to take what they're saying literally also seriously, but you also have to balance it with the underlying deeper use cases that they're trying to solve. And that's where user empathy comes into picture. What exactly is empathy? So empathy as a concept very simply means that you understand what the other person is feeling, and to do that, you have to be aware of your own, aware of your own feelings, and then you use that as a bridge to connect to the other person. And that other person in this context is a user to whom you're trying to sell your product. So connecting to that user and understanding what they really, are looking for, in the product. This is a nice articulation of what typically happens in user research. You go and recruit a bunch of users, or you go to a place and start interviewing people. There are multiple ways of doing user research, right? I mean, a lot of you who are product managers, you may have already done this, where you go into the field, have a bunch of focus groups, ask them questions, and so on. So users would have a verbal articulation. They would say, I want X, Y, Z, I want this feature, I want that feature, or this is my pain point that I'm trying to solve. But down below, there is this hidden, unarticulated need. And the real skill here is for the product manager to go deeper and figure out what are they not telling us literally. So here I want to play a quick video of Satya Nadella, which actually highlights the important aspect that empathy plays in the whole product development cycle.
Rishi, if you could share it via the Chrome tab one, then only we'll be able to hear the audio.
Chrome, how do I do that? Should I just...
Could you come back to it?
Okay.
Now we can stop sharing. When you share again, you get three options. If you click the third one, and there will be a share audio button in the bottom left.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Collaboration. No big thing gets done by one individual. Things get done by teams and collaboration. And so to me at Microsoft, we spend a lot of time thinking about not only collaboration and how we ourselves come together as one Microsoft to build the products, the services, the innovations our customers deeply care about, but more importantly, even the tools we use. I'm a very big believer that for any institution, any organization to endure and to have long-term success, it needs to be grounded in a sense of purpose that is renewed every day. In our case, when we talk about empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, they're not just a set of words. For us, it's about being able to do the hard work of building technology so that others can build more technology and staying true to that. You know, across Microsoft, we're always experimenting in how can we empower our own employees more. For example, the annual hackathon we do is a great opportunity for people across the company to get outside of any narrow boundaries we may have set up as organizations so that they can go work on things that matter the most to them personally and to customer needs that they seek and see out there. When I think about innovation, the word that comes to mind for me is empathy. Because if you think about the source of innovation, it's all about being able to meet the unmet, unarticulated needs of customers. And in order for us to be able to do that successfully, you need to have empathy. And to me, empathy is not something you go to work and switch on the button called empathy. It's more about being able to let life teach you how to become more empathetic, how to listen beyond even the words from your customers and partners, and then innovate. And that to me is what drives innovation.
Great. So the key takeaway, which I really liked about this video, is that how Satya articulated that empathy and innovation are basically two sides of the same coin, right? So innovation is nothing but addressing the unmet and unarticulated needs, and the bridge to achieve that is empathy, right? So So really underscores the point, and it just makes it like we talk about innovation a lot in product context, but we don't talk about empathy that much. But empathy is actually the one that is fueling innovation. So that's the interesting linkage in that video. One example that I have seen at Google where empathy was really used is collaborative editing. So I think all of you must have used Google Docs and so on. But if you go back in time when there was no collaborative editing, and if you would go and ask users what do they want, they would say, hey, I just want to create a document faster, right? I just want to finish a document faster. But if you go deeper into what they're really asking to do is that they want to complete the document, but the only way to complete the document faster is through collaboration. So they're basically looking for a collaboration tool and not purely an editor, right? And I think the team really did a good job there in terms of understanding this deeper level insight and build a collaborative editing interface, which became so successful, and customers and users loved it because now you are able to work on a single document together, which really is the use case. And today it's reached a point where people simply can't live without this kind of a feature. And then everyone else in the industry also had to implement this within their own editor interface. So this to me, has been one of the great examples of how empathy can fuel innovation. One other example that I can talk about from my own personal product journey was I used to work on a lot of security features for G Suite, and very often the IT admins who were the primary stakeholders in the productivity context would say, hey, we need better security features in terms of content sharing and so on, because financial companies and other companies are always concerned about whether the data within their organization is not accidentally shared by the employees outside the company and so on. So the key insight there was, how do we, if you ask the IT admins, they would say, hey, give us more controls. But actually what really works in practice is you just make the end users, the employees, more aware of the company policies, and you make them aware that, hey, this action could lead you to share this data outside accidentally. So building those features inbuilt into Google Docs, Google Drive, and everywhere else, so that they are able to avoid such accidental sharing by just getting those nudges and tips. And that actually worked out pretty well because then the IT admins also don't have to mentally keep a control of this, right? If the users themselves are aware of the policies, they themselves are getting nudged about this, then that makes the job of the IT admin very easy. One interesting product that I wanted to share when I was doing some research is that there was this really interesting product that Apple created. We've spoken a lot about Apple and how it's been successful. So there was a product called the Messaging Pad. The idea was that it would just take notes. It was priced at $6.99, which is very high, from the context that it was in 1993. And it did not do well in the market. One of the big reasons why it did not do well is that there were quality issues. So when users were using this, a lot of times the translation of what they were writing with their hand to an editor had issues. And the biggest competitor for this product was basically a simple paper and pen, right? Like people like, hey, I want to deal with these quality issues, I just write it on my own. So if you apply the product success framework that we were talking previously about, this product failed the essential needs requirement, which is one of the most basic requirements for a product to be successful. So the reason I brought this story is that it's important to understand that even great organizations can end up, launching products which are not that successful if they fail to connect with the user need, right? So the basic user need is, when I write it, it has to accurately convert it into an editor. If that is not being met, then no matter who's building the product or what brand name it has, it won't be successful. So one of the frameworks that I would like to introduce and propose to you, and I've used this a lot in my own experience, is how do you incorporate empathy into product management? So essentially, I see this as 4 steps. The first step is really doing active listening. So when you're doing your user research, using active listening, which basically means that firstly your user group on which the research is being done has to be diversified. So you have all kinds of different users based on the personas you're targeting. And the second is active listening is where you give the full opportunity to the user to express and almost encourage them to express their needs that they are not otherwise expressing. So one way to do that is ask them a lot of questions, right? Why do you need this, right? And use this framework of whys, right? Just keep asking why this, why that, and that way you'll be able to force the user to think deeply and articulate and really bring out the insights that they would like to share from a user feedback perspective. The second is once you get all of this input, prioritize based on what users truly want, right? So prioritize not based on the literal feedback, but prioritize based on the underlying use cases that you feel are important to the user based on the user research that has been done. And then design the features mapped to the top use cases, because you can only launch a small set of features because resources will always be limited. The fourth pillar here is comparative testing, right? So don't just create one version of mocks based on the features that you decide on. Create multiple versions and allow users to pick the mock, because what happens with user research and is that users find it easy to see a package in front of them to choose rather than just listing down the features. So this is a very critical step, and you will realize that a lot of times what you might assume does not hold true when the user sees the full package of features. And finally, stagger the execution and stagger the rollout. So doing prototype first, just use internal use, we call it dog fooding at Google, doing focus group versions, and finally use a percentage rollout method to basically launch this product. So this is a framework that I have found it pretty useful, and feel like, I mean, you should experiment and you should make modifications to this and build your own framework and see whatever works for you. But this was mainly like an idea, something that I have seen working pretty well on the ground. There's also an empathy practice that I wanted to quickly do. I want to first check. Suhas, do we have time?
Yeah, no problem. We can go ahead with this.
Okay. So I want to give you a short exercise here. Let's say a user is expressing a pain point, right? So user says, I keep losing my doctor's prescription. Each time I go to a doc, I have to repeat the history and sometimes I forget the details. So what I would like you to do is take this as a pain point that a user has expressed and tell me one or two needs that the user has not really articulated in this sentence, and what are the one or two features that you will build to solve these needs. So just type it in the chat and whatever comes to your mind, right? Just look at the statement and you can start typing. Okay, Rahul says each time can I have a video call instead? Okay. Joseph says they want to review a past prescription. Yeah, that's a really good one. I don't want to carry files. Absolutely. People don't want to carry cash these days. Why would they want to carry these long files of past prescriptions? Patient and prescription history, yeah. Okay, Alish says patient previous symptoms. Ruchita says have patient IDs and map all previous appointments and medical history to that ID. Interestingly, the Indian government has announced a health ID sometime back, recently actually, which might lead to a lot of product innovation in this space, just like how UPI was a trigger for a lot of product innovation. Yeah, I do not go to the same doctor, exactly. So that's a great point, Shanmugam, because People keep traveling, people keep moving cities. You won't go to the same doctor, or the doctor has retired. Now there's a new doctor. You can't keep using that. So some sort of system, some sort of health record information system is the need of the hour. Okay, what kind of features would you like to build? Like now, if you're the product manager who's building to solve this, any kind of deep features that you can think of that would be really that would create a wow factor for the users. Maybe the user never asked for it in their statement because they're only expressing their pain point. But as a product manager, what kind of feature you would like to build? Okay, Health ID, I speculate, is for Google to help with AI healthcare research. Okay. Any other inputs? Health reports vault. Yeah, that's right. Balaji has a good idea there. Beyond just records, is there anything else that the user would love to see if built? Patient profile built upon all past diagnosis. Rishad has mentioned that. Past orders. Security of all this data is crucial. Yeah, so there has to be security and privacy features. Anything that can be in the preventive space. Now that you have all this health record information, is there anything that this product can do to prevent the doctor's visit? I mean, this is the world of AI and data analytics and all kinds of machine learning. Reminders, yeah, that's a very useful one. Symptomatic treatment. Yeah, AI-driven diagnosis, collaboration with practice. Early identification of certain diseases. That's a good one because then you can lot of diseases, chronic diseases, they find root in lifestyle issues, right? So something that a user has been doing for many years leads to something else in form of some sort of illness. So now that you have all the records, now that you have all the health information and all the AI technology that exists, maybe users can get some sort of nudges. Yeah, so I think Satya has touched upon this point. Information fake. I think Shanmugam was a really interesting point. A lot of DIY medicines. Absolutely, absolutely, totally agree. Yeah. So I think just by looking at these comments, I feel like this is an innovation waiting to happen. Hopefully, the new health ID that the government is coming up with would be the trigger for a lot of smart VC money to come into the space. Great. Thanks for sharing all of that great inputs. Yeah, just to articulate, to highlight this point, the user only said the first statement, which is I keep losing my doctor's prescription. There can be a surface level interpretation to that wish there was a reliable source of medical history, which can be shared. But the deeper level, and this is where I would encourage PMs to go deeper, is that I wish there was a system that can point out underlying patterns. Wish there was a system which can become a medical assistant. Remind me of doctor visits. A lot of you had mentioned this. Wish there was a system that can provide health tips that can eliminate the need for doctors. So that's the holy grail, right? Like if you can reach to that point where lifestyle corrections can happen before time, so that when we are in later years of life, we are in a much more healthier state than what we would be otherwise would be great. So this was a short exercise just to emphasize how going deeper into underlying issues helps us build a very strong product, and empathy is the bridge to get there. So that was all I wanted to share today. And quick summary: product management. There's a product management successful framework that can be used. Empathy is the bedrock of product success and innovation. I would say if there's something that that you should take away. I think that is the one line that you should take away, that empathy is the bedrock of product success and innovation. And then there are focus practices, focus frameworks that you can do to build the skill set. It is a skill set and it can be built with practice. With that, I will stop here and just take any questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rishi. I think a bunch of questions are already flowing in to the questions tab. So guys, we have 20 minutes more for this discussion. So feel free to add any that you might have, and in case you could help us upvote the ones that you really like, I think that will also help. So, Rishi, just starting off on some of the questions that we had in our previous catch up from the registrations. And just splitting them into two parts. One is general product management, and one are some questions around your career, the work that you do. So, starting off with the general bit is one of the questions is around the path that you've taken. So, in today's age, do you think in MBA you've transitioned after ISB into one of the best product organizations, or which a lot of them lot of us, call as dream companies. So, what are your views in today's day and age when you hire product manager? Do you look at credentials for the first stage of qualifying? And if not, if someone is not doing an MBA, what are some things he or she can do to maybe break into Google or Google-like organizations?
Sure. So I think Google as a company has never made MBA as a critical criteria. I mean, it's not a mandatory criteria. In fact, Google was one of the first companies to start an APM program early on, and it still runs in the company, where Google goes and hires engineers from engineering schools directly to join as APMs. And a lot of our leaders today within Google are the ones who came through that program, right? Who joined Google maybe in 2005, 2006 as APMs. Today, all of them, most of them, I would say, are like VPs and SVPs and so on. So APM program has been very successful. It was pioneered, I would say, at Google, and has been very successful. And we have a lot of colleagues at Google who are in India and in the US who don't necessarily have an MBA. Having said that, I can share from my personal experience. Before MBA, I mean, I had done my engineering and I had worked in product companies. But what I felt personally was I did not, I lacked the financial side of things. So I could not, like, doing financial evaluation of features, financial evaluation of products. And that's why I felt the need that I should go and get an MBA, and that helped me. So it really depends, individual to individual. If there are people who have worked in startups early on, who have already got that kind of exposure, especially knowledge around, how do you evaluate product features, how do you, do a financial impact analysis and so on, then you probably don't need it, and you can just move forward. But if there are people who feel, who have only got exposure to the technical side of things and not really got exposure to the other things, then MBA can be useful. I mean, the alternate to MBA is also doing rotation programs. So you can rotate into a PM role for some time within your organization. Try that out, and then, if you do a good job and if you like the job, then you basically apply for a transfer. So I've seen that also working pretty well at Google and even outside other companies. At Google, we have a rotation program that people often use to move into product.
Got it. Just seeing one question pop up on the questions tab that we have here is, do you have an APM program for India? If not, when can we expect it? Is there something that's planned?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't at this point. The reason is the number of PMs in India has been small as compared to Mountain View and Bay Area. But over time, I would say, as we have last 1 or 2 years, we have really grown. I can tell you, when I joined Google in 2009, 2010, all the way up to, I think, 2015 or 2016, the number of PMs in India was, I would say, less than 10. And so it was a very small number. But last 1.5, 2 years, we have seen a massive growth of PMs in India at Google. So that gives me an encouragement that over time we might get a APM program. I can't give a timeline because I don't take that decision.
Sure, yeah.
but I feel like it might come, and it might come sooner than later.
Got it. Got it. Absolutely. Another question that's come up is around do PMs in India specifically work on like India specific problems? Like I can say for Google Pay, I know the way that a lot of these small hacks and innovations would have come from user behavior that you observed in Indian users. But was that the same case from 2009 that you started? Because I'm pretty sure Google Suite and others are global products, right? So how has your work transitioned around, some stories, some anecdotes that you can share?
Yeah. So I think before Google Pay, I would say the only product that I can think of which had a huge India-only kind of influence was Orkut, which we had like really long back. But apart from that, I think GPay is probably the only big one that I can think of, which was really innovated for India. It was a very India-centric, like the whole everything, right from research to launch, it was all very India-centric. But other products have been primarily global, right? So there, we work as a global team, and we just work together. So on, for example, in G Suite, I used to lead security, data analytics, and some of the other areas, and I would work with my colleagues in Mountain View, just like one team. Location really didn't matter, except for when you're setting up a meeting because of time zones. So that is the structure we have followed. But over time, what we have realized, especially for payments products, it was very critical to operate, to have a local focus area, because India is such a different country when it comes to payments. And the reason GPay became successful is mainly because of that. I think the team was based here, the team was started here, and the team thought about Indian use cases right from day one.
Okay. And now we see this product. Was this a product that started in India and went global? Was this one of those products? Okay,
Yeah.
that's
So
awesome.
there was a GPay, there was Android Pay before in the
Uh-huh.
US, and so there was Android Pay there, and then GPay started as Tez in India. That was the original name. So
Yeah.
that Tez journey was completely driven from here, and it
Mm-hmm.
was not. It was started from scratch. So then these two products. I mean, there was Android Pay already. It predates GPay, and then GPay Tez became successful, and then we basically started unifying the brand, because Android Pay became GPay in the US. So now
Okay.
we have one single global brand, which is GPay.
Nice, nice. Would you be able to tie this to the framework that you spoke about? Any examples on how user research and empathy made a significant change to the Google Pay product? Maybe from an Indian perspective.
Yeah, I think the fact that we had a local team which was entrusted with, really designing this product and stuff, that is the first step to empathy, right? Because you basically say, if you want to connect with your users, you have to be near your users. So I think that was the first step. The second step is, I remember there were a lot of detailed focus group studies that were done. There were a bunch of features that were built purely to address this. For example, just going with UPI versus wallet, that was a very important decision, because at that point, UPI was very new. So it was a bet, right, that was being taken. And one of the very important reasons why we felt UPI would be better, because uh, it it sort of removes the need to load the wallet, and this came again and again in the user research, and that's where I think empathy helped to understand that, okay, people don't like to park their funds unnecessarily, right? If there's a very good reason to park your funds, then fine, but people don't like to just keep their money aside, because when you use a wallet, then you don't get interest, right?
Yeah.
And then there is an extra headache of just transferring your money to some place, and then from there you transfer somewhere else, and then added to that, the regulatory stuff was also adding to more work for the user, because there's KYC and those kind of things, whereas with UPI it's just a bank account. There is no extra paperwork that the user has to do. So I think that insight really helped pave the direction towards UPI, and that paid rich dividends later on, right? Because we suddenly saw massive, growth in the UPI space across all products, not just GPay, other products as well. So I think that was one example, I would say. Um, I think scratch cards was the other thing that became super powerful, super popular. I think GPay was one of the first companies to start the concept of scratch cards. and it became, I think, gamified rewarding. I would say, if I have to pick a theme, it's gamified rewarding. Whether it is the Diwali games that we have, which is, there's one running right now, or this Rangoli stamp that became super popular sometime
Yeah.
back, right? So it is gamified reward experience, I would say, because Indians love these kind of things, right? I mean, I love to do that on my GPay app, like, hey, let's just play these games, and it's so much fun. So I think just gamification of payment experience, I would say. And a lot of these learnings are now going to the global stage, right? So this is actually a very unique product where the success in India and the learnings from India are actually informing product design at a global stage.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Do you see developed economies also going behind, say, cashbacks or gamification behind getting, that scratch card? Do you see that also working in an ecosystem, say, US or Europe?
Yeah,
Eastern,
absolutely. I
Eastern
think
Europe?
I think everyone loves cashback. I don't think there are any
Okay.
geographical differences there. Who doesn't
Okay.
like a good cashback?
Agree.
I think the difference is that in developed economies, the footprint of credit card is very big, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in India, you have 50 million credit card users and 950 million bank account users. So you see that big difference. Whereas in the US, it's the credit card penetration is very high, right? So that because of that, the credit cards are so deeply penetrated in user experience and the user behavior on the payment side that there's a need for innovating differently there because of this fundamental difference, in terms of the credit card usage and penetration.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Moving tracks, I think I'll pick up a couple of questions from the chat section, from the question that we already have here. Akhil and Alan, I think both have a similar question around biases. So I'm sure as a product manager, while you're building and a product that you love using, which is a daily use case product, maybe, how do you avoid personal biases? While building empathy, while talking to users, I'm pretty sure at times you feel, okay, this has to be there. I'm pretty sure others will also want this, but this could be your personal bias, and this is something all of us face. So are there any frameworks that have helped you tackle this problem?
Yeah, I think the empathy framework that I just shared, right, the 4 steps, really helps. I think in that I had mentioned the very first step is you diversify your user base on which you're trying to do the research, right? So your focus group that you're picking has to be diversified. It has to be diversified across multiple dimensions. It could be location, gender, income types, and so on. All right. So it's very critical that you are basically going around and picking voices from different segments, depending on which persona you're going after, right? Like what is the product that you're building? Within that scope, you have to diversify. And once you diversify that, and once you pick up, you identify, okay, these are the top needs, and you basically build mocks for it. Then you again go back, right? So the mantra I would say is keep going back to the user at every step, right? Don't assume. You will always have some assumptions, but you can test those assumptions. The idea is you test these assumptions by constantly going back, right? You constantly go back to the user. Okay, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. Even when you're actually executing, you do a prototype, right? And you say, okay, this is, you want to try this out. Tell me your feedback. So at no point you have gone away from your users, right? So I would break it into 2 steps. One is pick the right diversified user set. The second step is don't go away from your users through the journey, right? So that way, you can stay very close and you can test it. And in the framework I had mentioned that when you build your mocks for the product, have multiple version of those mocks. Don't just go with one version, because if you go with only one version, your ideas and your thoughts are solidly baked into it, but you're not leaving any space for alternate vision or an alternate approach to it. So go with 3 to 4 different, it doesn't have to be very detailed mocks, because obviously building mocks is not trivial, but it can be high level wireframes, and have 3 to 4 versions of it, at least for the main features, and then go to the users again and ask them to pick what works the best. And you will see a lot of, those inputs will inform, which way the product should be designed.
Interesting. Abhinandan asks, the current framework is great. Would there be any modifications that you'd like to make or suggest while we apply this to a B2B or a SaaS product? Or
Yeah, so I've worked both on B2B and B2C. Like G Suite was mainly B2B and payments is
yeah,
B2C. I didn't find a lot of differences. In fact, I feel like in B2B is probably a little bit easier because you already have users who are spending a lot of their time thinking about the problem, right? So, for example, in G Suite, I used to spend a lot of time with admins, IT admins, and because they were the ones who were managing G Suite within their organization, and I would spend a lot of time with CIOs, right, of all these organizations, because they would spend a lot of time thinking about, hey, I need to make sure the IT strategy for my company is going well. My employees are productive. My employees are happy. They're able to collaborate and so on. But when you meet these people, they exactly know what they need, right? So there's a lot of clarity. So I would say B2B is probably slightly easier as compared to B2C, because in B2C there are multiple flavors. So you need to do more testing just to make sure you're getting it right.
got it. We have something that is a little more specific. Um, any relation between the framework, the empathy framework that you shared, and the lean canvas model? I think lean canvas model is a lot more popular. Um, so any
No,
correlations?
I am
Okay,
not aware of that other framework, but
okay,
I will go. I will go and check it out though.
okay.
Thanks for sharing.
Perfect. No, perfect. Awesome. So I think a lot of questions around Google that a lot of folks had. I think a couple of questions that are a little more personal. What does your learning ritual look like? I'm pretty sure your day job is super hectic as it is, but what does Rishi do after work? What does Rishi do on the weekends to, make sure that you're growing as well on the personal front?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I really enjoy reading a lot of books. I'm a big believer in life is a lifelong learning journey, and I have a lot of interest in these concepts, these soft skill concepts, and how they impact work. So, for example, empathy is one concept. There is other things like emotional intelligence, right? So I read a lot of these books, from Susan David, from Daniel Goleman, and all these other people who have written books on emotional intelligence. And so I try to do that. I also teach some courses on mindfulness, emotional intelligence at Google, inspired by these concepts. So yeah, that's what I do. And on the product side, I read a lot. I try out a lot of products. So anything that excites me and makes me curious, I try to feed my curiosity. So I think that is one mantra that I try to follow, and I encourage my team as well. Is that you should always, as a product manager, feed your curiosity. Right? You hear something new, download that app, try it out, see how it works, have an opinion, and very important to have an opinion. You can't be a successful product manager if you don't have opinions. So form opinions and be curious. I think that is curiosity is the best teacher, I would say.
Absolutely. I think yeah. I mean, very recently this part has become popular. Any ideas on how to do you think curiosity is something that can be learned or is it inherent?
I think it can be grown. I would say. I think we are always curious. Like look at children, right? When they grow, when they are born, they are so curious about everything, right? They get so amused with colors. They get so amused with fans. Like I remember seeing children, observing children. They get very curious about fan, the way it works. They get very curious about sand the first time they touch sand, right? And you can leave a child in a sand pit and they can spend hours because they're just like feeling the sand. They're just so curious about how things are going. And somewhere as we are growing, our curiosity sort of diminishes. So I think it's there within us. It's just a question of understanding the importance of curiosity and
Right,
feeding it and being amused with it and getting excited about it. And
right,
that's super critical for learning. It's super critical to just even feel more young, I would say, right? Like when you're curious about things, you're
right.
always bubbling with excitement. You're bubbling with new ideas.
Yep. No, absolutely. I think community is something that has really helped me, just a little lot more because even if I don't know about something, there are other people discussing this, and that at least okay. like they say, right? You don't know what you don't know. So many things that many people know, they keep sharing, they keep discussing, and you just, even by just being a fly on the wall, you get to pick up these things. So that is
Yeah.
one, I don't know, it's a hack or, but yeah, definitely over time. You need to do this on your own, but there's at least a starting point that I've seen work for me. So I'm just sharing that. A bunch of other questions coming in on the PMing side. So maybe we'll just take one or two before we wrap it up. We have a quick rapid fire for you. So
Sure.
one question is around prioritizing, especially at an organization that's as large as yours. I'm pretty sure lots of ideas that stem bottom up, top down from the users. So how do you go about prioritizing which one, really gets built and which one goes live?
Yeah. So I think at Google we are very data focused. So and so there are two things. One is Google is very bottoms up. So the ideas really come from product managers, engineers, and the tech leads, which is great. Like I think all of us at Google love that bottoms up thing because that's what creates innovation and so on. In fact, Gmail was a 20% project for one of the engineers, and that became such a big hit. And then from Gmail came G Suite, right? So you can see the chain of
Nice.
innovation that has happened. So I think it's bottoms up. So what we do is, if you have, as product managers, as we are building roadmaps and so on, we try to get as much as data as we can, and try to first figure out what is your North Star. So the first step is figure out your North Star, right? So on GPay, for example, let's say my North Star is I want to grow the number of users I have, right? Or I want to improve the user satisfaction. So that's my North Star. Once you establish your North Star, then you say, okay, to achieve this North Star metric and to achieve my goal, what will move the needle, right? And what will be my strategy? So the second step is you define the product strategy based on your North Star and the goal that you want to, achieve. From the product strategy, you come to, okay, more tactical stuff. What kind of features I need to build. So once you have that, then you get supporting data, and then you go to your leadership, you present, because there's a lot of intense discussion that happens at a prioritization level, right? You go and present to your VP and say, okay, this is what I want to do. They will say, okay, show me the data, and then you prove it to them. They might have some counter opinion. Then you go back, get more data. So that's the typical cycle, I would say. And to your question about prioritization, I would prioritize anything that moves the needle the most, right? To put it simply, of course, you have to look at effort and impact kind of metrics there, and to see, okay, you can only pick things which are reasonable in terms of effort. It cannot be something that is very difficult to do or will take like 3 years to build. But the golden rule is anything that moves the needle on your North Star metric.
Very interesting. Um, Rishi, I think just running out of time on this one. Couple of more questions, but I'll share that with you in private. To wrap this up, a very quick rapid fire that we have for you. What are three early stage startups that you're excited about? Like, I'm pretty sure you might have been seeing a lot of a lot of them in the Indian ecosystem, lot from the Valley. But any early stage ones that you're really excited about that you've come across?
Um, I think in the edtech space, I see a lot of interesting, startups. I think Unacademy is there, and there are like few others that I've noticed are doing some really interesting work. I think edtech is on fire,
Right.
and I see a lot of interesting work that's happening there. There's Baiju is there. Like there's so many of them, especially in
Yeah.
this kids education space. I think there's so much of stuff happening there. The other field that I feel is very interesting to me is healthcare. I think there's a lot of preventive healthcare startups that are coming in that are doing some really good work. Like CureFit is there, and there are a few others as well, which are I think there's Healthify Me, and there's a few others. And then in the valley, there are so many of them that are pretty exciting and interesting. So I think education and health, these are the two areas where there will be a lot of investment that's already happening and will only grow, because I think this is a space where the most number of need is there right now, right, from a user perspective.
Got it.
So I think e-commerce, for example, used to be like the hot space sometime back.
Yeah.
E-commerce is sort of, a lot of innovations already happened there. Payments, I think a lot of innovation has happened, and payments, I think, still will continue. But I think education and health, I feel, are like the two other new things that will go on for a very long time.
Nice. Nice. Got it. Next on the round, I think you already mentioned a bunch of books that you read, and you mentioned that you read a lot. So, any particular resources or top three books that you've read recently that you'd like to recommend for our audience?
There's one book that I'm reading right now. It's from Susan David. It's called Emotional Agility, and so that I'm finding it really interesting. There's another book that that I've read is from Daniel Goleman. That's about emotional intelligence. That I would recommend everyone to read because we only spoke about empathy, but if you look at emotional intelligence, it's a rainbow of skill sets. Soft skill, we call it soft skill, but I call it life skill because these skills are so critical, much more than even technical skills that you might need. Because as a PM, and there are a lot of product managers on this group today, as a PM, you have to influence without authority, right? Like you don't have engineers reporting into you. You don't have design people reporting into you, but you have to influence them. You have to run the entire cross-functional team. And the way to do that is through these life skills. So I would recommend these two authors highly, Daniel Goleman and Susan David.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Last one on the rapid fire is who are three folks you'd like to give a shout out to? These could be people who you would consider as mentor. These could be your colleagues or anyone that you probably just follow on social that you think might be interesting for the rest of us to connect with.
You mean in the tech space or like in the VC? Like what's the scope?
All good. I think in just interesting people is the scope. It doesn't have to be predominantly product or tech. Could be even diverse fields.
You mean like three people who have... Sorry, go ahead.
Who have impacted your journey maybe?
So I've got inspired by a lot of different people, in terms of, in my personal life, in the company, I've got inspired with a lot of people and I keep getting inspired every day. But I think people who are well known in the space, I follow, I like what, I follow Kunal Shah's tweets on Twitter.
Yep.
I feel like they're very insightful and very interesting.
Right.
So I follow that. I check out a lot of TEDx videos from different kind of people, especially in the space of product management, emotional intelligence. So Daniel Goleman would be the other person that I follow a lot and see what he has to say about things. On the product side, I would say, trying to think. So I'm a big admirer of Tesla and what Tesla has done. So Elon Musk is high up on my list. And I just love the person's audacity, right? Like just going like SpaceX, for example, it's crazy, but he's doing it and it's successful. And I think the kind of revolution he's bringing in the electric cars segment is pretty phenomenal. So I listen to him a lot on YouTube and so on.
Absolutely. And yep, with that, we just want to wrap up. The last question that we have for you is one of my favorite. It is on if you knew then what you know now. So, Rishi, you had an illustrious career so far, and I'm sure lots of things to come for you. So, just want to know how one thing that, if you knew back then that would impact, and what does the next couple of years look like for you? Anything interesting that's coming up?
Even if I can go back in time and do something different, is that what you mean?
If you go back in time and if there's something that you could tell to, a 25-year-old Rishi that, hey, this is something that I realize now. And if I knew this, what I know now, this might have impacted or helped me in my journey.
Sure. Yeah, I think I definitely would love to share that. And I think I'll be super honest here, is that I think one of the things I have realized over time is that there's a lot of buzz about working in a large organization, right? Like being a product manager in a large organization. What I've come to believe now after many years is that there's a lot to be learned even in a smaller company. A large company is great. I mean, I'm not denying that, but I feel like, especially in product management, if you join a startup, the learning curve and the learning trajectory could be super exciting because you have, like, there's no choice but to basically handle a very large scope, because large companies can afford to hire a lot of people, but small companies cannot. So what happens is, to a PM, is that you end up handling a very large scope, and hence I advise to a lot of people, like I routinely advise folks from business schools and so on and engineering colleges, and they ask me about, hey, how do we become a PM in this particular company. And I always say that if you're thinking about being a product manager, don't index on the company that much. Think about the role, because the role itself is so nice and so exciting and so gratifying in terms of the learning, that you might end up being better off in some cases if you're joining a smaller setup, because you will be working closely with the founder. You will get access to how VCs think about companies. You'll be working very closely with your top customers, right? Which you may not get if you're working in a larger setup. So I think that I would say, to a 25-year-old aspiring PM, I would say that don't think about only big brands and big organizations. Think from a longer term learning and so on, because if someone takes that route, they might actually start their own company very soon, much sooner than someone who's probably been in a larger setup for a very long time.
Interesting. Yep, with that, thank you so much, Rishi. I think lots of learning from your deck, from your journey, as well as all the insights that you shared with us from, your your particular stint, and I especially loved the last section. So thanks once again, Rishi, from all of us for joining us, and thank you
Sure.
once again to everyone who joined today. Hope you guys enjoyed the session as much as we did hosting it. In case you want to catch a recap, we'll be sharing the recording on our YouTube channel as well. And yep, see you again next week.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for taking the time to join. I really enjoyed interacting with all of you and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Awesome. Great.
Thanks, Rishi.
So, Rishi, if you could stay back in the networking lounge and you can continue to network with folks.
We could just interact.
Sure.
If you have time.
Cool. How do I do that? Like, I need to go.
No, we need to first take a break.